Okay, hello everyone, thanks for coming. The slide seems to be working, so I believe I can start. So, shortly about myself, I've been in venture capital investments for the last 13 years, and my first job in a venture capital was a fund called Satus. That was the first investor in the Bluebird team, but that was way different Bluebird team, much less organized and doing Polish version of Guitar Hero, Music Master Chopin, rather than horrors that we know them of today. And that's my cat, he's called Tamerlan. So, starting from the basics, investment decisions always start? No, because they are made by humans, and humans make errors. So, if you're sometimes wondering why some investment has been done, maybe it wasn't just not a smart investment. And you need to always remember, there's not a single group of investors. It's not like a club. You can have different people with different approach, different knowledge, and different expectations. So you cannot judge investor based on one particular example. You need to actually think that everyone is probably different in a way. So as I mentioned, people different with their knowledge, their expectation, and the time they can spend on analyzing your project. So just to give you like a basic idea, not everyone is an investor in all their time. Some people just invest the surplus that they have been doing from their daily jobs. Those people who I call occasional investors. So they can be, for example, your friends, your uncle, someone wealthy that you met, or, for example, owner of the commercial center, as it happened to be investors in game dev studios. Later on, if the company goes public, you can have individuals investing in on the stock exchange. But you have also different group. The group I myself belong to, so people who actually do it as their daily job. So from them, you can have different expectation. You can expect them to understand a little bit more of your business, but they also have more time to analyze whatever you're showing to them. And very important thing, if someone becomes the shareholder of the company, they can be called investors by many people. But you need to actually understand that there are two ways of joining the company. Either it's a capital increase when the company issues new shares, and that cash goes towards the budget of the company. So for example, if you're actually planning to fundraise for the game, that's the way to go. But there's also possibility of someone purchasing the stocks that already exist, and that money goes to the seller of the stocks, not to the company itself. And I would like to also mention a couple of popular misconceptions. NFTs, Web 3.0, crypto, all the blockchain stuff. I've heard numerous of times about investor wanting that, about game devs, trying to implement that because investors want it. I can only tell you shortly, no, we don't. And that's not the typical day of investor either. Sometimes it's just the people, who have their own companies that want to invest that surplus for their kids to have better life and not work that much. So if you're actually thinking that's how it looks like, no, it's a hard work. And also, if you see people from venture capital or people investing, we're not bankers. We don't wear suits. We actually look weird, when we sometimes meet the bankers or later stage funds. That's how it looks more. And if you're presenting your project, it doesn't need to be perfect. Actually, if you're showing that, okay, I'm missing this and these things, you sound much more believable. I've seen a lot of projects which trying to be perfect, but if you scratch a little bit, then you see that it's not as great. And this thing, some of you may have heard about it, and some people may really think that there are some investors who are writing on this kind of portals. No, no one seriously is considering that. But sometimes you can read it for fun and see funny names or funny stories most of them made up completely. So. And another misconception is when I'm being approached by companies and they're saying, okay, so we want to do this game, but we have an option for this and this and this budget. But what does it say to me? For me, what I can see, it's you don't know what you're doing, because why should I decide if the budget should be X or Y? If you're saying, for example, that 250K is enough for the game, why do you want 1 million? And you don't have to push for the biggest budget there is. So you can actually just focus on the size that makes sense for your perspective. The bigger is not always better. And how to separate facts from fiction. So one thing, investments are interconnected with the risk. If there is no risk, there is no reward. But what you want to achieve and what you actually need to give to the other side, the investors, is that the reward from investing into your company the reward is bigger than the risk itself. And what is a success? In case of game dev, it's selling the game in the great numbers. If you make money on the game, that's the success. But what is not a success? That's not a success if you get investment and suddenly you start spending the money in huge numbers, like moving from a tiny office then to the biggest and the most expensive office there is, or spending a lot of cash on events or cars in a car park and so on. So that's not the way to go. If you get investment, that's just the beginning of the way. It's not the goal. And taking advantage of fools, that happens, and that happened a lot in the last few years. Well, that's not something you should be proud of. So yes, you can get money from different kind of people. You can bullshit your way into it, but should you do it? Not necessarily. So one thing that's important to remember, failing is not wrong. You can fail. That's, as I said, investing is connected with risk, but fraud is not the same. So if you may be tempted to bullshit your way into getting an investment, there's a couple of things that you need to consider. So there can be a moment in time when people realize that you were not honest, and maybe the things that you promised are not to be delivered. Maybe the prospect you showed them had little to do with the reality, or you didn't have the team that was able to deliver the quality of the game or scope of the game. So when the people will realize, they will not be happy. And you risk also running out of fuel, because usually the projects very rarely complete in the first initial budget. So you're gonna see probably like a couple of next financing rounds that you need to raise to complete your project or get your company working as it should be. But if you lied in the beginning or you were not honest, you can run out of the fuel and not be able to fundraise. And I think, in the worst case, if you actually committed a crime or bullshitting your way into investment, it may be considered a crime. So basically, better not to do it. And last but not least, well, if you bullshitted, cheated, how can you wake up on the day after day and look yourself in the mirror? So being honest and fundraising in an honest way is also a good thing. So how decision-making process works? Well, it's a little bit different on different stages. So if you're fundraising for a new studio, then the team is the most important factor, because there's not necessarily a lot more to show. There's not a prototype yet. There are no wish lists, no communities, no discussions on your Discord. So the team and what they have done in the past is the most analyzed element. Second thing is the reasonability of what you're showing. So what's the scope of the project? How big it is? Is it doable? If you're pitching to me that you're doing a Diablo 3 in a team of 20 people, that's not really gonna happen. Another things to consider is the sales potential. If you're doing a very niche kind of game and the numbers, the statistical numbers of them are particular, then you're telling me that you're gonna sell 1 million copies where the other games were selling in tens of thousands. That's not necessarily a way how I'm gonna understand it. What I'm gonna see is probably you have no idea what you're planning to do. Very important thing if the team has a leader, because you need to consider that in the beginning everything may be going smoothly, but there will be a crisis, there will be a problem. So you need to actually see if it's you or someone in your team that's a leader. Other things like budget, cap table, or who are your current investors or shareholders. In the later stage of the investment, there are more things to show. There's prototype or the vertical slice that you can demonstrate and show that you're able to deliver. There's a sales potential that can be better verified if you, for example, start gaining followers or people who want to actually play the game. So the later stage, the more you can show in a way that your game is being recognized, that the game is gaining traction, the better for you. And it's also worth to remember that there are some people who, if they are your investors or shareholders, that they may bring another people on board because of their reputations, but there are also some people who can make it more difficult. And a couple of things that, for example, myself as an investor, see on a daily basis and far too often. So in the beginning, if you're leaving your previous employer as a group, everyone is in love. And it's like, we're gonna make the games together till we grow old. But usually, it's not gonna last forever. So you have to actually put mechanism in the company itself. What happens if at some point you'll have different visions? Who's gonna make decisions? Who's gonna take responsibility if the decisions were made good or bad? And what happens if someone decides that they don't want to work with you on the same project anymore? Very often I see studios pitching about their grand vision for the next 4 or 5 games and I know that they're almost out of money. So basically we're doing a very good face to a situation that is not necessarily that great. Be honest about it. If you're fundraising and you need to fundraise quickly because you have cash flow problems, don't pretend that everything is fine. Just be honest and say, okay, that's the situation. Myself, I've been talking to one of the studios that was telling me that everything is great. We have so many customers, we're doing projects and game after game, it will be released soon. And after like 1 month, I get information that they went bankrupt because they didn't get paid. And far too often, blaming other people for the misfortunes of the company. I hear very often that it was someone else's fault. The game didn't sell, it was publisher's fault. Okay, you spent too much money, that's investors' fault because they gave us too little, or someone else's fault. Failing, as I said, is not a wrong thing, but at the end of the day, just remember who signed that publisher, who got this investor on board, who made the decisions about all the things. And very often, in the last years, we get the creator of the Witcher symbol. It almost never is being shown. I've been working as a lead artist or programmer on the game. No, I've been co-creator of Witcher. So be honest. Be honest about your role. If it was also a minor role, it's nothing to be ashamed of. But be honest and not necessarily call yourself a creator of The Witcher, because, well, that's just not serious. And very often, I see the studios trying to make kind of a push for the decision very fast, because they're trying to prove that they have other options. So we need to do it now, tomorrow, without checking all the things that we need to do. So no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work on the people who are doing the investment as their daily jobs. And very often, it's also shown like the grass is greener on the other side. So there's a foreign publisher, investor, or whoever wants to give you money. It's just waiting. So we need a little bit for now, but you need to be quick because they're already waiting. So if they're waiting and they're so eager, why don't you sign with them? Do it. And showing or trying to prove that the studio has many offers. Well, the offers are gonna be different. They're not all the same. So if you have different offers, just choose the best one. It's, if you're telling me that someone else made an offer and I don't like the project, just the same fact of you telling me that is not gonna force me to sign faster or earlier or at all. And on numerous times I see that it was not the studio's fault that there was a problem with the game, with the budget. It was the investor who made me do it. There was even some podcasts I've been listening to of the people saying, okay, so that's investor fault. They were so sneaky, they were so tricky, they were so cunning that they were able to trick us. But you didn't have to sign with them. At the end of the day, unless they're keeping you in a basement with a gun to your head, you don't have to sign the deal. If you don't like people, don't sign the deal. If you feel there's something fishy, maybe it's better to wait and look longer for a better occasion. And something that's becoming quite a recent trend, that people announcing that they're doing the Witcher killer. I mean, Witcher is obviously one of the most famous games from Poland that has been recognized all over the world, but you don't have to compete with them. Just do the game that you will be the best at, and you don't have to prove anyone that you're making a better game than Witcher. Just make the best game that you can. And how to identify and approach the right type of the investor for your project. So basically, if you get multiple offers, just look onto people and what they have done in the past, what kind of the companies they invested in, how they've been helping them to grow, how they behaved in the times when the situation was maybe not so great, because that the investors and people who you get on board are gonna be with you for a long time. It's not something like with a publisher, they only sign for a single deal. The game is published, it's sold, that's it, it's done with the publisher. But with investor, you're gonna stay there for a couple of years, so choose your champion wisely. And as I said, look how people get involved in the life of companies. Because some people will just be able to provide you with cash. If that's enough for you or not, it's up to you to decide. But you have to be realistic about it. If someone has no track record, no network in the game, that is not able to connect you with the proper publishers or help you to analyze the publishing agreement, then you have to be aware that they're not gonna suddenly become aware of it. If they don't have the experience, they're not gonna get that experience suddenly. And a couple of tips and tricks. So if you are going to an event, but or any occasion, be prepared to pitch. Have a pitch deck ready, something that you can send immediately, something that shows your game, how it is supposed to be done. Put as many references, reference titles, show your sales potential, show your team, and be ready to send it immediately. Not like, okay, you've met someone, you want to discuss your company, and then there's nothing that you can send. Just have a PDF ready at your email all the time. And as I said, especially at the earlier stages, but that's equally important, the later one, is the team. So show the team, and preferably what they have done together in the past. If the people work on the same projects, if they were able to deliver some things, or if they were able to actually live with each other and not to go crazy. Because people have different ways of working, they're always humans, so some people work in a particular way, some procrastinate, some are early risers. So the more you can show that the team has a potential to be stable, to deliver things, and not just go into human nightmare in a few months into the project, the better. And be reasonable with the NDAs. The pitch deck I mentioned, just send it without any NDAs, because it just doesn't look serious. Have a deck that you can send, and the NDA may happen later. If there are some things that are more fragile, okay, that can be protected additionally, but don't start with it. And don't be an asshole. It may seem trivial, but that was an actual reason I have ceased some negotiations. If you're behaving in a way that people don't want to talk to you or spend the time with you, the investors are not gonna invest. If you're passive-aggressive in your way of communication, that can be the deal breaker as well. There was an actual founder who I stopped replying to emails because when I was reading them, my pulse was rising above the level I considered good. So I said to myself, do I want to work with this guy for another 5-6 years? The answer was simple, no. And don't lie. Lies have usually very short life. Be honest. If you're missing someone in the team, if then something is not perfect, or you need some contacts, if you need some help improving your project, that's okay, but don't lie. If you have problems with something, don't hide it. I've seen a number of times the founders trying to hide some problems, but the problems will arise. And even on the process of signing the deal, you can have these skeletons in the closet unveiled, and then you wasted not only your time, but the other sides too. So be honest about what's the condition of your project. And have a clear vision about what kind of games you're doing. Because with every game, you gain some experience. Your team starts to get particular skills. A lot of people are speaking about Hades and how successful it was. And that's the second one coming. But not a lot of people realize that the previous games were just very similar. And if you even look at the screenshots of Bastion, the first famous game, it looks very similar to Hades. So be clear if you want to do particular types of games, because that's helpful. You're gonna learn, improve, and iterate. So every game will be better. And even if your first game is not a great hit, maybe the second or third one will be. An important thing, I understand that you might be tempted after leaving your current employer to make the game, the best game there is in the world, that you want to prove the whole world that you're the best game maker in the world. But start reasonably. Start with the game that you can deliver. Delivered game is always better than unfinished great hit. So make the game that you can make it with the budget, with the people that you have, with the time that is reasonable. So the scope needs to be not the biggest, not the smallest, but just the way that you can deliver. And there will be the time for the game in the future. And if you have hated some things at your previous place of work, just don't repeat them. If you've seen, for example, talks about bonuses from the revenue from the game that were never actually mentioned again, or that they were never paid, well, don't repeat that. Be able to share. If you're making a new studio, be prepared to share with your crew the spoils of war. Because for me, I'm looking at the new studio, it's like equipping a pirate ship. If you succeed in getting that wealthy merchant ship and you get a lot of gold, share it with your team. Because they risk a lot, they risk the same things as you did. And don't be too fast with creating an entity. Because, well, some people just start with the company, and it's very easy to open one nowadays. You open it with a couple of clicks on the internet. But usually, if you don't have like proper experience about it, you're gonna make some simple errors. And it will only add some extra work. It doesn't speed things up, it actually makes a lot of issues. And as I said, investment is not a success. It's the beginning of the road. It's like gaining fuel for the company to get to somewhere. So if you don't treasure the fuel, if you spend it in a careless way, you might not get to the place you intended to. And you need to realize that if you open your own company, you're responsible not only of yourself, but other people who trusted you. You're responsible for your employees. You're responsible for the trust that your investors put into you. So you need to be aware that this is something much more than a daily job. And making your own company, regardless of industry it is in, is a big responsibility. It's not something that it's 5 o'clock and you can just shut it down and go. It's gonna be with you all the time. And that's something that I see very often. Probably like 30% of the project I'm getting preached about, they fail the simple math. Do the calculation of the sales potential, the fees of Steam, of the publisher's share, taxes and fees. These are the things that you can actually Google, you can actually check and do the basic math. So what's the sales potential of the game you're planning to make in this particular genre? Compare it to other games that they were released in the past and look what's reasonable sales volume that you can achieve. Do then the calculation with the price, with the Steam, publisher, taxes and fees, and see if that is bigger than your budget. Because very often I see projects that pitch to me and they fail because their budget is actually bigger than the money they can make from the game. And that's a thing that appears from time to time when the market gets better. So all different sorts of intermediaries, of people who are gonna tell you, well, I know your project is not perfect, but you need to boost it up. You need to tell investors some things. And you may think like, should I do it? And these people usually work on the basis they take a share or a percentage of the money they fundraise for you. But the thing is, you need to be careful if you're not get involved into bullshitting people into giving you money. Be honest, because at the end of the day, it's you that people will blame, not those people who just acted as intermediaries. So, if you're wondering what to answer to them if someone asks you, okay, you need to paint the grass greener, the answer should be simple. You say, well, maybe not today. You say then, no, I'm not going to do it. And I think I've reached all the slides that I wanted to mention, and I wanted to leave some time for questions. So if anything got you interested or you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Hi Greg, I'm Piotr from Something Random, and it was a very nice presentation, and I have one question and one thing that I disagree with you. So I'll maybe start with the thing that I disagree. You said that you should not settle the entity very soon. And I have the opposite opinion, because if you already finish this process, you want to go into the discussion arguments with your partners, and also you will probably cover up the situation with the IP ownership, which might be crucial and difficult to sort it out later. And the question is, what's your typical pitch? Like, is it a pitch prepared for the VC, or it's the same pitch that is sent to the publisher? And if your potential investees are aware that they are coming to the investor, not to the publisher?
So about entity, fair point about the IP. Usually, just the simplest way how to hold it is either each of the team members remains as a owner of the IP, or for example, one of the persons or the leader of the group actually signs the agreements and holds that IP. So that's a very good point to keep in mind, that you need to remember about who produced what and who's the owner. So I don't know, at some point if your game is being released, it will not be blocked by someone, but you can do it, for example, on your self-employment entity for the time being, and then create the entity, the proper one with the proper mechanism when you're ready. And about the pitches, they come in loads of different ways. Sometimes we get the same pitch as the publishers. We get 60 slides. That is far too often, because we don't need for the first glimpse to look at every character you're gonna have in the game. It's not that important. So, well, the better prepared pitch for investors is always welcome, but we work with what we get.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm working with Japanese gaming industry, and I was wondering if you could tell a few words about the best ever pitch you came across. Like, what was it, and why you thought that it was the best?
Very good question. I might be still waiting for that, but
best so far. Best so far.
But maybe what is, for me, from my perspective, what makes the pitch the best, especially for the early stage team, if the team experience is shown in a very clear way. If we had people working together, it would be great to, for example, show it in a form of even like a simple table, you know, like, okay, who worked with whom, you know, on which projects, when they were delivered, what was their experience, what were their roles in a particular project. And the more I see people work together on same projects, the happier I am. So that would be for sure like a description of the best pitch that you can have.
Hi, thank you so much for a great presentation. My name is Maciej, and I've got two questions to you. How does it work? I mean, investing in your case. I mean, does your capital obtain the shares of the company, let's say limited liability company, or does it work like differently? That's the first question. Okay.
Yeah. So we acquire shares or stocks, depending on the type of the company. Usually we go for stocks and the type company which have stocks, because that makes other things easier, like for example employee stock option plan, which is a must-have in our investments. So all the team members who are in the core team should be rewarded with the thing that is most valuable in this case, so the stocks of the company. So yes, we obtain new shares that are created for us in the company, and that is the capital increase. So there's a new emission, new stocks, and that's how our money go into the company to produce the game.
Are we going like for 51% of the shares, like in the beginning, or it depends on like investment and like how does it look like?
So we're always going to be minority shareholder, but there's a couple of companies that become successful, and they've been creating their cap table or the company structure in a way. So if you look at the companies that are succeeded, for example, Creepy Jar, and that's probably like the way how to structure your fundraising, how you want to get your cap table looking at the particular point in time, how much it needs to stay for the team to be motivated. So the team shouldn't have too little shares, because then you become like an employee with a couple of extra stocks. So look at the companies which were successful, what was their structure, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just look at the best cases. You can also look at the bad ones and see what not to do. But learn from the ones that made it well.
Okay, and the last question from my side. At the early stage of the investment, let's say, you are just looking on the pitch deck, and do you need to have like vertical slice on the early stage, or is it just like some cap tables, some graphs, some like ideas, maybe graphic, like some assets, and that's it, or maybe like gameplay?
So we don't require the prototype or vertical slice, so that because we are early stage investors, so we understand that the work needs to start. But the more you can do on your own, it doesn't have to be like real life working prototype. But if you were able to make even like a fake demo to show how your game is gonna look like, it's not just a concept, but you can get the feeling, even if it's not playable. That would be welcomed as well, because that's something that you can do even if you're having a daily job somewhere, and do it after hours. So it doesn't need to be perfect prototype, but the more you can do, the more you can show, the better, of course.
Hello, Anna Sierhej. Juggler Games. My question would be, what is the best way to approach investors? Should we just send an email, or is it better to book a meeting at some conference? What, from your perspective, is the most successful way of approaching?
So, for example, in my case, I try to be on every event that is important in the industry. So just simply coming and discussing what you're doing is very welcome, because we're here to talk to you guys. So just feel free to approach us. If you know people who work with us and they do an intro, that's also very nice. But even a simple email, that's enough too. But from my perspective, if I met someone on the conference and they showed what they're working on, that's the most effective way, because I'm here at the moment and I'm speaking to you, so I have time. If I just get an email and I get a lot of emails, it may be less effective, to communicate that way. So feel free to just talk to us.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, thank you for a talk. I have a question. Do you make an investment like in full project, or you make some like milestones that you have like first like investment in some prototyping and then maybe you will invest more, or only full project like from start to finish?
So in our case, we do sometimes a number of financial rounds for the company. We're happy to be the first investor on board, but we're happy to participate in a further financing rounds. One thing that's important, it's better not to fundraise the whole project at one point, because if you have very little to show how it's going to look like, and if you're able to deliver, you don't have too many hands or too many cards on your hand in negotiations. So, fundraising for the whole project, if you don't have a prototype or vertical slice or whatever, is worse, it's harder, it's less effective, and you get worse deals than if you divide it into parts, for example, that are connected with your project's development. So, okay, you get the first investment, then you get the prototype, vertical slice, and so on. And you fundraise at different valuations, so the money, when your project, starts to look better and better, and you're able to prove that, for example, team is able to work together effectively, and people are not spending their time fighting all the time, but they're able to deliver milestone after milestone in your production, then the money becomes cheaper. So it's better not to fundraise for the whole project, but adjust it to the stages or the important stages of the product development.
And second question, do you give something more than money for the project? You support them with something else, some marketing or some like knowledge based or connections?
Yeah, so in our case, we're industry-focused investors, so we do only game dev. And because of that, we see a lot of cases. So starting from, we become, I believe, some sort of a database of good things that work and bad things that didn't work. So we're able to share from our experience what are the typical problems with your creation of your studio, or going forward with the production, maybe how to reward the team, how to construct the employee stock option plan. That's what we're able to provide. But we're also talking to publishers, and publishers, I believe, may be a little bit more open to us than to studios, because for them we're kind of like a natural partner, because if you have publishers from different countries, they control over if you're delivering stuff is less strict than for someone, for example, who is investor in your company and tries to help or tries to ensure that you're delivering what you promised. And also, from our perspective, if we're speaking to publishers, we have a little bit different position, because for us, we're gonna invest into multiple game dev studios. And if particular publishers doesn't do his job very well on our portfolio project or the game from one of our companies, I will make sure that they will never sign a deal with another company I ever invest. So for them, it becomes a little less of a single-time deal, but more relation-based. So for us, if someone works very well with our companies or the companies that we invested in, they're gonna see the games first because we know that they will deliver. But if the publisher screws our company, we'll make sure that we'll never sign with any of them again.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. I think we are running out of time. So thank you for your speech. Thank you for your attention, for your time.